Hello guys, how's it going? My name is Dallar, and in today's video I want to talk to you guys about Roll the Bones, which is the main mechanic for Outlaw Rogues. And the reason Roll the Bones is important enough to make a video over is because it is the main way Outlaw Rogues deal damage. Being able to maximize the usefulness of Roll the Bones depending on what buffs you get and knowing how to use them properly will overall increase your damage as an Outlaw Rogue. So I want to make sure to talk to you guys about this. I want to showcase you guys some of the ways that I've been using Roll the Bones in different PvP situations using this BG video of Temple of Kot Mogu, which is a good BG example. And I want to talk to you also about some of the combinations of different buffs and some of the utilities, which buffs are good for which situations, and when you might want to re-roll some of the different situations where you really should re-roll to see if you can get a better buff. Because while all the buffs are a direct DPS increase, not all of them are good for specific situations where you can actually get a little bit more damage and a little bit more usefulness with just a different type of buff. Also, as an assistance to anybody playing Outlaw Rogue, I decided to put an enlarged version of every single buff that I'm talking about so you guys can memorize the image. So when you'll see the image of the buff that you get in the top right corner or wherever you have your buffs at, you'll be able to tell what buff you're working with just from a single glance, and then you'll be able to alter your playstyle just from knowing what buff it is. So learning what every single buff is, and there's 6 of them overall, is very crucial as an Outlaw Rogue, and that is something you guys will have to do on your own time. So memorize the buffs, memorize them by picture, and memorize their effects by the corresponding picture. For the most part, I think I've got the buffs down myself. I know which image corresponds to which buff. So for the most part, I can apply that in BGs fairly easily. But for anybody who is not used to this mechanic, this is something you will have to practice in order to get better at it. So let's talk about some of the buffs in today's examples and how they can be used. First buff is an easy one, Sharkinfested Waters, which grants you 40% increased crit chance. Now, this buff is fairly simple playstyle. Just utilize your big buttons, utilize your killing spree, drop that cannonball barrage, and especially if you get this as an opener, make sure you get as beefy of an opener as possible in your opponent. This buff also combos really well with all the other buffs. It is just a nice damage buff. It is a crit chance, so it's only a chance to crit, but for the most part it is a direct damage increase. It also combos really well with any other buff, so if you get any buff for Roll the Bones plus Sharkinfested Waters, then you get some really beefy damage coming out, so use it while you got it. The next buff is called Buried Treasure, and Buried Treasure is an interesting buff. It increases your energy regeneration by 40%. I would have to say this buff is the most interesting one because it is not a direct damage increase. It is useless if you don't really know what you're doing with it. This buff basically signifies that, hey, you get a lot more energy, but it's all about how you spend that energy and how you use it. If anything, this buff is very unique if you're trying to deal any range pressure. While Outlaw does have pistol shots as range damage and range CC, it does not mean that you have sustainable range pressure. But with the extra energy that this buff feeds you, the buff of Buried Treasure, you can use pistol shots a lot more often, especially in range when they're trying to kite, when they're trying to chase, deal damage at range, or simply get as much combo points in order to line up for maybe a stun or a run through or whatever you're trying to go for. This buff combos well with all the other buffs. Again, it is not a direct damage increase, but it does supplement for energy regeneration. So this buff is damage increase, or can be used as damage increase, but also can be used as utility, like making sure you have Feign Up and getting Crimson Vial at low energy. The next buff is another one of those passive buffs, and it's called Gran Melee. It is basically the remnants of the good old Slice and Dice. Gran Melee increases your attack speed by 40%, but it also has an interesting effect. It has a 20% leech. When they changed up Jolly Roger and made it an offensive buff rather than a healing buff, they threw in a 20% leech to Gran Melee, which makes Gran Melee the only defensive buff that can be used in order to get a little bit extra healing from Crimson Vial. Now, should you roll into this buff specifically for defensive purposes? I don't think it's worth the time. I think it's better just to take every buff you get in an offensive manner, and if you end up rolling into Gran Melee, then go ahead, take advantage of the healing potential that it has, but I don't think it's worth having to roll into it on purpose. This buff combos with just about every single ability, especially Jolly Roger. It works so well together and works really well with the energy regeneration. Then there's Jolly Roger, which is one of my favorite buffs. Jolly Roger gives you a 40 increased chance that you'll get a free proc for Saber Slash each time you use Saber Slash, bringing up the chance to 75% per hit. So you have 3 out of 4 chances to get a free proc of Saber Slash, which will generate an extra combo point and give you a free pistol shot that will also generate a combo point. So this way you're able to press one ability, get 2 combo points, and get a lot more run-throughs, be a lot more conservative with your energy, and each saber slash hit is a direct increase to your damage. So imagine being able to hit 3 saber slashes or 6 saber slashes back to back. And the damage increase that comes from this ability is awesome. This ability combos with just about anything, but I think it combos the best with Gran Melee or an energy buff. Or even better, Broadsides, where Saber Slash has a chance to generate 4 combo points in a single global cooldown. Broadsides is a buff that reads that every single ability that generates a combo point will generate 1 additional combo point. This ability combos really well with a couple abilities, and the general premise behind it is to generate combo points and be as least wasteful with them as possible, and get a lot more finishers, so a lot more run-throughs for damage increase, a lot more stuns, and being able to keep up your energy and being able to be more conservative and getting a better value out of a single combo point building ability. Works really well if you just need 2 combo points with Ghostly Strike, which will generate an extra combo point as it generates only 1 at 30 energy, so you are able to mitigate for combo points and combo point management and energy management a little bit easier as an Outlaw Rogue. I feel like this ability combos really well with Outlaw Rogue as well as Gran Melee, as you're able to get more hits, able to get more auto attack damage, more finishers, and more combo point uses. And then we have the buff of True Bearing, which is probably one of the best Outlaw Rogue buffs ever. It reduces the cooldown of most of your abilities for every combo point that you invest into a finisher. That finisher being either your Between the Eyes, which is a stun, or Run Through, which is your like old school Eviscerate. This buff is very unique because it applies to a lot of buffs, whether it be defensives or offensives. That means you can get your cloak and repost up as early as possible. You can get your stuns up a lot more often. You can use grapple and hook a lot more often, and sprint. With proper management, you'll be able to use Killing Spree and abilities like Cannonball Barrage a lot more often. Just a really interesting buff, and it basically rewards the player that is able to manage your combo points and energy properly and is able to invest them. I feel like this buff combos really well with either Broadsides or Outlaw Rogue because both of those buffs practically generate an extra combo point. That means you can get a lot more finishes in there, and the more finishes you get into your opponent, the faster you can get your cooldowns. But like everything else in the world, if you wanna really get good at it, you have to practice it. So get to learning all the buffs, get to memorizing them, and eventually after playing and practicing, especially in BGs and arenas, you'll simply get used to the image of the buff, and then you'll be able to recognize without having to say out loud, oh, that is Outlaw Rogue. That means I need to use Saber Slashes, but sparingly to see if I get extra procs, and you'll be able to do that with all the other buffs. So I hope you guys enjoyed the video. If there are any other mechanics of an Outlaw Rogue that you guys don't quite understand, let me know in the comments below and I might just be able to make a video for it. Thank you guys, hope you enjoyed. I'll see you guys in the next video.